Get a real job somewhere.
All right, I think we'll start
You'll
now.
like Stanford better.
And we'll just let the other people dribble in, since this is a typical Washington audience, and y'all come late. But that's okay. But you're all here, so. My name is Mark Moore. I'm Program Associate in the Asia program. Thank you for coming today. This program is co-sponsored by our History and Public Policy program, which has got a great acronym, HAP. And they're happy to be here, I'm sure. And also it's my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Sungjun Youn from Kyungnam University, a former very distinguished senior diplomat in the South Korean Foreign Ministry. He was his country's ambassador to the United Nations and also to Iran. And thank you for coming today. Before we start, let me make a brief statement about Hala Esfandiari, and I think most of you, you're familiar with her situation. Hala is director of our Middle East programs and a dual Iranian-American national. She went to visit her 93-year-old mother last December. She was prevented from going to the airport. She was under house arrest for several months. On May 8th, she was imprisoned. On May 29th, she was formally charged with espionage and endangering national security through propaganda against the system. The Woodrow Wilson Center, along with Hala's family, colleagues, former students, and many organizations, are continuing efforts to bring attention to Dr. Esfandiari's unjustified arrest. Yesterday, there's more news out of Iran. The Iranian authorities announced that there was new evidence found against her, and that necessitated further investigation. The Wilson Center yesterday had a press release, which Lee Hamilton, president and director of our center, said, among other things, "We are deeply disturbed by these new reports from Iran and by the fact that Hala remains in Evin prison, despite not one shred of truth to any of the charges brought against her. As Lee, has said countless times before, Hala is a scholar. She is not a spy. Let Hala go." If any of you are interested in conveying your thoughts or opinions to the Iranian authorities, there's our website, www.wilsoncenter.org, has links to, for instance, the Free Hala campaign, and you can express your opinions there. Okay, now for our program today, it's on North Korea. We've had a lot of programs in the building today on Azerbaijan and other things. Today's North Korea. And I'm particularly pleased to have the speakers that we do have, that many, on any given week you can, and justifiably so, find programs about North Korea's nuclear program. And there is a regime. It's not a particularly pleasant one, and they are going after nuclear weapons. They've tested a device. Looks like the six-party talks have a glimmer of progress, which is always good. Today I wanted to focus on North Korean society and the people, and we have some very excellent speakers for you. To my left is Miryang Youn, who's a public policy scholar here at the Wilson Center, has been for over a year. We've been very fortunate to have her. Miryang has spent 19 years in the South Korean Ministry of Unification, and her experience and her expertise has been invaluable to all of us. She's spoken around town at SAIS, at other places on North Korea, and some of you may have heard her speak there. It is the Ministry of Unification, not the Foreign Ministry, that negotiates and has direct contact with North Korea from South Korea. So Miryang has had many, many years of experience. Here at the center, she's writing a book, or she's almost finished with a book, and she'll talk to you about some of her observations of the book. And the subject is the status of North Korean women. To my far right is Donald Macintyre, who was Time Magazine's sole bureau chief from 2001 to 2006. And he's a fellow at Stanford University, also writing a book, and his book is about how growing exposure to the outside world is transforming the lives and mindsets of average North Koreans, and what this means for the international community's efforts to engage with Pyongyang. To my immediate right is Dr. Stuart Thorson of Syracuse University, who directs the Syracuse University Integrated Information Technology Research Collaboration with Kim Chek University of Technology in North Korea. Who knew that North Korea had a University of Technology? I did not know that, but I did find out through somebody in this audience told me about it and said, contact Dr. Thorson. It's really interesting. So I did, and he's here today, and he'll tell us all about this very interesting and rather unique exchange program. So without further ado, before she kicks me, I'm going to turn it over to Miryang.
We may kick each other in the end. Thank you, Mark, for your kind introduction of me. Even though you are going to kick me, I needed to say something about our Wilson Center. Taking advantage of this opportunity, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Woodrow Wilson Center. I think I was really fortunate to be accepted here. I didn't expect to be accepted here, but after I arrived here, I realized that even though before I applied here, I knew that Woodrow Wilson Center is great. But after I arrived here, I realized how lucky I was to be accepted. Everybody in this center, every staff, every scholars was so much encouraging and caring. So I think I can never found any other institute so much conductive, so much encouraging to write a book. So I finished my manuscript about North Korean women, but I don't think I could do that if I weren't here. So I really thank all of the Wilson staff. These days I have a big worry about something. I'm not so sure who could be excused not to be mentioned in my book in acknowledgement. Sometimes I think, Michelle and Daniel and Janet should be included. Joe, of course, Bob and Mark, naturally. Then who else? Lee Hamilton and Mike, of course they should be included. Then should I add one list or annex of acknowledgement in my book? I'm not so sure. It's my biggest concern these days. So I thank you, and I'm going to leave soon this center. I really miss you all, even now. So thank you. Before Mark tried to pinch me, I tried to begin because yesterday, I was strictly instructed that to be in time, otherwise he will pinch me. So now I'll begin. My interest in North Korean women begins with two questions. It's interrelated, but a little bit different. So interrelated but separated two questions. North Korean regime has claimed that it liberated women by making women the working class, and by making the North Korean society into socialist society. Then, is it true that North Korean women are liberated? That's my first question. And second question was that, can women be liberated by law or regulations or by the government? Or can any people be liberated by or by order from the above, not by themselves? It was my interrelated first initial questions. Try to answer that question. I looked up on all the development of North Korean society and women's life. As you know, women compose half of the society, half of the population. So women's life contains almost every aspect of North Korean society. So I had to take into account all of the aspects. But today, I'm not going to in detail about in education, in legal aspect, in economy. It will take more than 2 hours, and everybody in this room would leave by then, so I wouldn't do that. Just I would like to point out just one thing or two things in my 20 minutes of discussion. That first, North Korean regime in the initial state tried very hard to make women work outside of the home. But I don't want to say that North Korean regime tried to mobilize women just because of the labor force. Kim Il-sung several times mentioned that women are a wheel of a wagon. That means a wagon all the times runs with two wheels. If one wheel, which is woman, is out of order or it's not moving fast enough, then the whole society, the whole wagon could be just lag behind or could be jeopardized. So Kim Il-sung liked to compare women as one wheel of wagon, men the other wheel of wagon. So Kim Il-sung believed that as a communist, Kim Il-sung truly believed that women could be liberated as soon as they become the working class. It means as soon as women begin to work outside of the home, then women could be almost automatically could be liberated. It was his belief. Based on that belief, Kim Il-sung made every effort to make women work outside of the home. Even though there was no means at the time, he tried to make so many laws to make women work outside of the home. The first law, even though it was before the North Korean regime officially inaugurated, Kim Il-sung and communist colleagues made several laws. One of the first law was sex equality law, or these days you may say gender equality law, but North Korean official translation is a sex equality law. It was formulated in 1946. North Korean regime was inaugurated in 1948, but 2 years before already the sex equality law was formulated and implemented. In that law, women were given every equality, legal equality in full. Women gained the equal opportunity to education, and women were franchised. Every possible legal right or equality at that time were given to women. So, and another thing is, Kim Il-sung tried to include women in every social reform at that time. North Korean regime launched almost a revolutionary reform. It sounds strange. It was, I would say that North Korean reform was a rather revolution, and in that revolution, North Korean communists launched a lot of measures, and in every that kind of revolutionary measures, women's aspects, or these days we would say gender sensitive measures were taken. For example, in the land reform, women were given land as much as the same amount of land. There was a little difference among ages, but adult women were given 1 point like men, adult men. In this order, women were given, and women were recognized as the full rights with men. So from the beginning, North Korea made every effort to make women to be equal and to be an equal employer, equal worker of the society. And the principle of equal work for equal wage for equal work was introduced, and 7 hours a day working hours were introduced. almost of these days equal legal procedures were also introduced in the year 1946. So I would say that based on his communist idea, Kim Il-sung made every effort to make women equal and make women the working class. In response to the regime's call to be a working class, women participated in labor force rather rapidly. Considering the Confucian social order that prohibited women to work outside, to be seen outside of the home, it was rather dramatic that women's labor participation rate grows so fast. And women's activity was not confined to economy at all. Women were rather first mobilized into the social organizational activity. The Women's Union in North Korea was the first social organization to be born in North Korea after the liberation. The Women's Union in North Korea came into being in 1946. And then other social organizations like youth union or labor union, all sorts of other social organizations followed the suit of the Women's Union. In that Women's Union, women were mobilized, and the Women's Union was the cornerstone of social reform or social campaign for reform. And because of that activities, women's status during all stages of the North Korean regime were dramatically enhanced. Considering, of course, it's compared to the Joseon or Japanese imperial period. At that time, women's legal status was so low. Women didn't have any parental right, didn't have any property right. Compared to that, women's status has been dramatically enhanced during the 1940s, late 1940s. Because of that, during Korean War, women were physically or practically, women were the logistical provider for the war effort. While men were at a warring front and they were in the battlefield, women kept the factories running and make the land to be cultivated to produce food. Without women's effort to keep the factory running and to keep the land farming, North Korea cannot last for 3 years to the Korean War. It was women who made the back front strong enough. But so I would say that in the initial stage, North Korean regime was sincere in enhancing women's status, and in response, women paid the North Korean regime with sincerity and dedication. However, as Kim Il-sung began to monopolize the political power, and Kim Il-sung tried to idolize their family, his whole family, women's luck began to change. North Korean regime, when North Korean regime first tried to idolize the Kim family, they first idolized the two great mothers, the mothers of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. Idolizing the two great mothers is not hurtful to women in a sense, but the way the two women were idolized was problematic. The two great mothers were depicted as just thoroughly loyal to their husband and the in-laws, and they never answer back to their husband and in-laws. They never argued against the husband's will or the in-laws' will, and they were quite wise to their children, but just submissive to their husband and in-laws. It was the North Korean women's ideal women. So North Korean women are instructed and inculcated to follow the model of the two great mothers, who is submissive, loyal, silent, and compliant to their husband and in-laws. If we put it the other way, women were educated to be obedient to their husband or to men in general. That kind of following the models of the two great mothers began very late 1960s, but it was fully blown in mid-1970s. So since 1970s, women were educated to be rather polite and submissive to men. So women's situation in North Korea was rather ironic. In one hand, women became the working class, and since the 1970s, women's proportion in the labor force was almost half. As actually, sometimes it's more than half. So women became the full one wheel of a wagon, and the other wheel could be men. But women became full member of the society. But at the same time, women are instructed to be submissive to their husband and to men. So very different women's ideal emerged. That in one sense, women should be workers and equal workers. And on the other hand, women should be women and take care of the whole household work, and very polite to men, and submissive to their husband and in-laws, like that. But North Korean women are educated like that, so they have a lot of unpinched already. Skipping other things, that kind of women's submission is changing these days after the so-called arduous march. During the arduous march or during famine, it was women who collected the foodstuffs for every ways. Women foraged at the field. Women or sold small things in the markets, and women made small things at home and sell in markets. Women sometimes peddling all over the country to sell small things and gain small profits to feed their family. And it was women who became the breadwinner and sustained their families survive. In other sense, I would say that it was women who made the North Korean regime model through that famine. So I would say North Korean regime's effort to liberate women was partly successful, but in the end it was not successful enough. Then making women liberated by law was not working. But these days, I think women are beginning to liberate themselves. It was after the economic collapse and after the arduous march, women begin to question the social gender relations. And then these days, women's position are changing after the economic collapse. Rather, during the economic collapse, they became the main force of the survival, and during the arduous march, women became the main force of marketization of North Korean regime in general. As Andrei Lankov observed that women make over 70% of North Korean marketers. If you go to North Korean market, you can see almost all women, not rarely you can see men. So it's the whole North Korean economy was almost run by men. It could be polemic. I'm inviting your attack, but it's my observation. Before I was kicked again, I would conclude. What I want to say is North Korean women are not that pitiful. Of course, they are poor and they are subject to human trafficking in some cases, but they are strong and they are sustaining the whole family and the North Korean regime in a sense as well. It was my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I just, one of the reasons that we have to move along is we're being webcast, so for those of you out there in virtual reality, hello. But there's a conflict, and the webcast is going to go off at 4:45, so we'd like all speakers to present by 4:45. For those of you out there, again, in virtual land, I am told by our audiovisual professionals that the record of the tapes will be put on the web, so you can get them tomorrow or the day after for the question and answer period. So without further ado, for some very interesting videos, we go to the reporter in the group, Mr. Macintyre.
Thank you very much, Mark. It's a great honor to be here. I just wanted to start out with some video clips, and just to show you some about
그러지 마라. 우리 집에도 아버지가 계셔.
It's from a famous movie about a marathon runner. She's lost inspiration.
저기요. 성님.
Another brief one. This is.
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak into the microphone? They can't hear you
Yep.
upstairs.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Just another brief clip. This is about a village in the countryside where they were trying to. It was part of an urbanization of getting people to go out in the countryside and develop the country and devote themselves.
바라볼수록 지내볼수록 정이 드는 거잖아요.
난 이 뚜까에 나오면 늘 마음속에 떠오르는 생각이 있답니다.
무슨 생각인데요?
우리 마을은 논이랑 하나하나에도 밭이랑 하나하나에도 오보이 시로님의 발자취가 오려있지요. 세 차례나 우리 마을을 다녀가신 오보이 시로님께서는 우리 청년들이 대지에 튼튼히 뿌리를 내리고 일을 많이 해서 바로 여기서 공산주의 새살림을 맞이해야 한다고 간곡히 가르쳐 주셨답니다. 그런데 우린 아직 그 높은 뜻을 다 받들지 못하고 있지요. 수령님의 심려를 덜어드리려고 애는 쓰지만 너무도 하는 일이 적지요. 그러나 난 믿습니다. 우리들이 2배, 3배 더 힘을 내어 일한다면 모두가 부러워하는 공산주의의 상천이 우리 마을에도 일도서리라고 말입니다.
저도 뭔가 힘장하는 것 덮고 싶군요.
고맙소, 네 양돈.
It's really racy, but they have to. Unfortunately, I'm going to get kicked if I play these too long. It doesn't get racier, I can tell you. Now, just by way of contrast, I wanted to play something from South Korea. It's not entirely fair because this is a cell phone ad, actually, for Samsung cell phone. But what I'm going to talk about is, one of the things I'm going to talk about is how South Korean television programs, soap operas and dramas have become so popular in North Korea. And this gives you some idea of the contrast, I think.
Let's get this party started. I'ma make a mood a party. When I step up in the club, it's on. Cause you make me wanna sing your song.
너의 뻔한 습관, 너의 뻔한 방식 나한테 들키지 마. 그냥 너 혼자 늙어버려.
Go, go, go. It's that flyest thing that makes me lose my mind tonight.
Just keep playing this. Anyway, I think you see why Kim Jong-il has a problem. South Korean television videos, soap operas have become extremely popular in North Korea, and this is something that I think is changing North Korea and changing the mentality of the average North Korean. North Korea has been an intellectual desert, essentially. You hear talk about the famine, but there's been an intellectual famine as well. In the 1960s, the North Korean authorities were confiscating books. They were burning books, and any foreign book, including Russian ones. This country has been more closed intellectually than probably anywhere else in the world. A friend of mine in Seoul told me a story about when he was a boy in the 60s, and the authorities came and knocked on his door and told his father who was a writer, to hand over his collection of foreign literature, and they took them out and burned them in a swimming pool, communal swimming pool. This was in Pyongyang. His father actually kept some of them stashed under the floorboards, but this has been the atmosphere in North Korea for a long time, and really the only thing you could read as a North Korean was the biography of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, and what you saw on television were movies. Some of these movies are sometimes interesting, but the theme is always how great the dear leaders are, and the dear leader and the great leader, and it's always about building socialism. There's no kissing in North Korean movies. There's what you saw is about as racy as it gets, and the average North Korean has lived with this basically without any entertainment of any kind for a long time. Why should Kim Jong-il care about this? It kind of hit home to me when I met a woman in China, North Korean, who had fled her home. She wanted to get to South Korea, and she told me about watching South Korean television or South Korean videos. Actually, there were bootleg videos of South Korean television dramas. They get copied in China, taken off satellites, copied, and then sent into North Korea. And she had seen these love stories, and she said, this just opened her eyes to something she'd never imagined. She'd never, not just that you wouldn't see it on North Korean television, but that she hadn't imagined that you could have relationships like this. The sort of openness of the relationship she saw, and she told me she would run a wire to a local factory to steal electricity, and then watch South Korean TV dramas all night long. And she said that was really what she saw on these videos was what pushed her to leave North Korea. This contrasts, I think, with the standard image of North Korea as still a Stalinist country or a totalitarian country. People are brainwashed. They can't think for themselves. That may have once been true, but I think I don't think it's true today. And every day that passes, it becomes less accurate, I think. It's very hard to know how many people are watching these videos, just as it's hard to know how many North Koreans are listening to Radio Free Asia. But if you, one of the things I tried to do is find out where can you see these? And I've talked to people in the DMZ and Kaesong who say you can watch videos there. I've talked to people whose business was distributing videos, and I think it's pretty clear there's a distribution network. You can. I was told by a former state security agent that these videos are available in the smaller towns. The barrier really is money. You have to be able to pay for these. But in some cases, people will come over to someone else's home and watch them. And so I think a lot of people are watching these, and actually state security in particular, because they get to confiscate them. And we don't really know what happens to these videos once they get taken in. When I first started hearing these stories, I wondered, well, how do you watch videos in a country with no electricity? And you probably heard stories about the authorities shutting down the electricity in apartments, and somebody gets caught with a video stuck in their recorder, which probably happened. But these days, a lot of people have either generators, or that's if you have a little money, or car batteries. And you get a car battery, and you plug it in. You when the electricity is running, recharge it, and then you use it to run whatever you have. And the woman I mentioned had been stealing electricity from factories. I don't know how common that is, but it's probably not uncommon. What sort of impact does this have on people's mentalities? Again, you can't do scientific surveys. Can't do Gallup polls in North Korea. You just have to try to talk to a lot of North Korean defectors. Not just defectors, though. If you go to China, you can meet traders. You can meet people who are migrant workers who say they're going to go back to North Korea. And you just see how many stories overlap. The facts kind of line up. I met a veteran in the port city of Chongjin, and he was there to meet his sister. He had, his sister was trying to get their mother out, arranged for him to come out to the border. Turned out she couldn't leave; she was too sick. But he was going to meet his sister, and I talked to him, and I was curious. I was trying to find out what North Koreans are learning and how their mentalities are changing. And I asked him what I asked him if he'd heard of the U.S. North Korean Human Rights Act. Just on a wild sort of, let's see what he says. He said he'd heard of it. And I said, well, really? How did you hear about this? He said, well, I read about it in the Nodong Shimun, the Workers' Party paper. And, the Workers' Party paper is taken a very dim view of that act, which is aimed at, as you know, helping North Korean refugees, improving the flow of information into North Korea. But he said, I read the stories that were written about it, and I read between the lines, and I figured out what the U.S. was trying to do. I thought that was very, very interesting. Students of Eastern Europe will recognize that kind of thing, reading the state papers, the state media, and figuring out what is really going on by reading between the lines. North Koreans have been watching their own state media for some time, I think, and getting clues about South Korea. The North Koreans started broadcasting footage from riots in South Korea in the 1980s as propaganda, show how bad things were. I've talked to a number of North Koreans who said, yeah, we saw that and we thought, geez, those students are pretty well dressed. And look at those buildings in the background. And one woman actually told me, I couldn't believe they were throwing those bottles because we would keep them in North Korea. As I said, I don't think this won't surprise students of Eastern Europe. I think similar things were happening. I don't think we're seeing a dissident movement, not even really an underground one, but in the economic sphere, I think there's a lot of change going on, and this is contributing to it. These changes are all, of course, driven by the events that, since the famine, when North Koreans were forced to sort of go out and trade, make a living. The border with China opened, and you had products, food coming in. Am I going to get kicked? Okay. You had, daily necessities, rice coming in. By the same time, you had these cultural products that start to come in. So the two things are going together. But what you have now is, I think, the growth of a sort of economic sphere where North Koreans are interacting, and they're outside the purview of the state. And I don't think that is necessarily politicizing them. In some cases it is, but they're probably more apolitical. But in the North Korean context, being apolitical is a political act. If you're dealing in the black market and selling videos, you're not on board with Juche, the official ideology. I think, and again, statistics are very hard to come by, impossible to come by, really. But I would say that for a majority of North Koreans, ideology is already dead. And the North Koreans you talk to who come out, of course, are somewhat selected group. Although, as I say, they're not all refugees and defectors, but they will say what matters in North Korea today is money and survival. Survival if you're at a certain level. If you're successful at trading, then it becomes making money, and for some North Koreans even becoming fairly well off. The average North Korean depends on the market for practically everything. You talk to North Koreans who haven't seen rice distributions for years, and the North Koreans actually shut down the grain market about 2 years ago, trying to roll back some of the economic changes that I've been mentioning, and of course immediately they went back into the black market. You can't survive without being able to buy food from the black market in North Korea, and that's a change that I think is just going to accelerate. Do we know that Kim Jong-il is actually worried about this? Again, he doesn't say much publicly, but I came across a North Korean government document that wasn't really meant to be distributed to Time journalists. I got it checked out. It was a document really for party cadre on sort of what not for the average person, a little bit above that level. What do you tell people about what's going on? And this document said a bigger threat than the U.S. military might is cultural pollution, meaning videos and radios and books and all the rest of it coming in from China, and the spread of Christianity. And the document essentially said if this isn't checked, socialism is going to crumble like a brick wall soaked in water. So I think there are some other indications that the regime is concerned about it, and you do see periodic crackdowns in the border areas particularly on video distribution. I've been told that if you're caught distributing videos, the penalties can be extremely serious. But I've also been told that, for example, in Pyongyang, if you're caught with a video, your equipment will be taken away and your video will be taken away. But if you know the right guy, you go and pay a bribe, and then you get it back. And so I think that for the North Korean regime, they have a problem because once you have this kind of thing happening, combined with corruption, growing corruption, then it's very, very difficult to roll it back. And I think that what North Koreans are seeing, now is there is an image of a different kind of Korean society, one that is prosperous and free, and it is very attractive to them. And I think that the South Korean soap opera may turn out to be the samizdat of the high-tech age. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that's a very interesting point, as North Korea rails against the United States and Japan always. I always thought when I was a Foreign Service officer and negotiated with the North Koreans in the late 90s and early this century that watch out for South Korea. They're the ones that might gobble you up happily. Okay, and now for SNT in NK.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I want to add to the list of people thanking you for inviting me and for all of you coming here. I mean, for the kind of academic I am, the Woodrow Wilson Center is just an incredibly important place for the intellectual life that it has, and in a more concrete way for the kinds of things, the projects that are going on here. One of the ones that's very important to me is the Cold War Document Project, where some of our ability to understand what's happening in DPRK and try to interpret how they may be thinking about things is deeply informed by having access to the kinds of documents that are being archived here and being distributed. So it's a real honor for me to be here. Beyond that, I've learned several things, even above the substance here. I've learned never sit next to Mark, because you're likely to get kicked. So I'm over here to be a journalist. And number two, don't follow a journalist, because they have great videos. So next time it'll all be different. But for now, what I have is relatively quick. PDF presentation, and I'd like to talk about the academic scientific collaboration that I've been involved in with a lot of other people with Kim Chek University of Technology in Pyongyang, DPR, Korea. And in doing this, I want to emphasize not so much the science part of it, although I'm happy to talk about that, but really the human side of it. What does it mean to be involved with North Korean scientists? What has it meant to them? And I want to try to illustrate that through some quick photos and then hopefully get through this to a point that we can have discussion, because many of you out there I already know much more about this than I do. I'm not an area specialist. I'm a political scientist whose interest is in how information technology affects governments that may be argued to be in transition. They may be becoming more democratic. They may be moving toward a more market-based society. The kinds of things that Don was talking about interest me as well. How does information help to transform things and shape what's going on? Last point before getting into the overall presentation is one way of looking at what I want to talk about is, and this is more of a technical point I suppose, it's an existence proof that it is possible to collaborate with DPR Korea. That doesn't mean it's possible to do it in areas of high politics. It doesn't mean it's possible to do it in all areas. It doesn't mean that these scale up well. But at least we've got a sustained collaboration with an institution in North Korea. And I think that's of interest just because of what that represents. But I'll try to put some more flesh on that as we go forward. This looks like the images are going away. Does someone know how this, or why this, can you hit that or try to make it come alive again? Oh, so it's going forward. Okay, well, the picture that was there before was a picture of North Korea, and I just wanted to give you a sense of just a part of the beauty of DPR Korea, as well as some of the things we're more used to seeing, at least here in the West. And science collaboration is important, I think, and Norm Neureiter has a wonderful quote that was in Science Magazine a little while ago, talking about the important use of science collaboration as a way of beginning to engage and influence in ways that are by choice rather than by force how it is that people think about the world they live in this particular case, how North Koreans think about their world. So while the collaboration is about, in part, human relations and so on, it's also a medium through which North Koreans can be encouraged to join the world community through standards-based collaboration. And I would say one of the things that I've really learned in working with them is, at least in the areas I've worked with them, how eager they are to understand what the world standards are, and then, whenever possible, to move along with them. And that's consistent, I think, Donald, with what you were saying about the real lack of information in DPR Korea. So sometimes simply bringing some of this information in gets them to choose to behave differently, and again, in the narrow area that I'm talking about right here. So this is all, as you'll see, standards-based collaboration. The two kind of hallmarks of what we've been trying to do is, number one, build trust between us and our counterparts in DPR Korea, and number two, then to use that to try to explain and work with them to develop standards that work for both of us and that, in fact, are part of global standards. And I'll give some concrete illustrations of that. But before doing that, I want to just give a brief history of the kind of projects we're talking about so you have a sense of what we are doing or think we're doing. There we go. Okay. The first is a bilateral collaboration between Syracuse University, involved very deeply with the Korea Society. Don Gregg and Fred Carrier have been instrumental in helping us to get to where we are, and Kim Chek University of Technology. When we started working with Kim Chek, they were one of two comprehensive universities in the north, Kim Il-sung University and Kim Chek University of Technology. Obviously, Kim Chek University of Technology has, as its name suggests, more of an emphasis on technology, which was appropriate for what we wanted to do. A second stage of the project is the multilateral Regional Scholars and Leaders Seminar Program, which we've had supported by the Henry Luce Foundation and has brought in China, the Republic of Korea, and the United States, trying to get, if they're really going to be global standards, we have to move beyond just bilateral collaboration to something that's bigger than that, and that's what we've been trying to do. And then something we're very excited about, assuming it actually happens, is a Junior Faculty Leadership and Development Program, which will begin in the fall of '07, we expect, at Syracuse, and then spread out to other universities, which will bring young academics from DPR Korea to the United States to spend a semester both pursuing their research interests, but also importantly, learning something about how U.S. universities are administered, what roles different people play, and something about the relationship between universities and their community service, all this kind of things. How do the universities? And Maria Batua, who's here now, has worked on similar projects with Eastern Europe in the past, where one of the real challenges has been simply to come up with a way of crosswalking between the way in which these countries talk about their higher educational system and how we talk about ours. So simple things like, what is a credit hour? How are North Korean universities actually organized? What do they do? So that's another thing we're hoping to learn much more about. Let me talk briefly about the bilateral collaboration. As I say, that's Syracuse, Kim Chek University, with the enormous support of the Korea Society. And its focus became to help to develop the first digital library in North Korea, which is located now as a physical facility at Kim Chek University of Technology. This project has been going on since late 2001, so it's been going on for a while now, and they actually have a physical facility in the north, this digital library. And one of the challenges we immediately faced was initially they were going to categorize the books or the information they had, and the technical term for this is metadata, based on advisements they had gotten from Kim Jong-il as to how this information ought to have been organized. And Kim Jong-il, like Jerry Yang with Yahoo, has his own ideas. They may be very good, but they don't always work universally. So we encouraged them over time to try to use international standards, the so-called Dublin Core, for organizing things. And now over about a period of a year and a half, they did. And they did in part because they recognized or I think they decided that it made sense for them in principle to be able to connect their digital library to other digital libraries in the region and around the world. And that couldn't happen if they didn't share meta-level ways of categorizing information. The second thing that we emphasize for them is to use open source software when possible. As you all know, DPR Korea is under a sanctions regime from the United States and now the United Nations. It makes certain kinds of computing software very difficult for them to get a hold of and to actually use and get maintenance on. And so being able to use open source software is valuable on two grounds. Number one, it provides things that they can use that are widely available and are not subject, in most cases, to export licensing controls. And secondly, it provides a way for them, in principle, to contribute back, because a key to collaboration with the North is that it really is a collaboration. It's not a one-way transmission of information from us to them. I suspect I've learned more from them than they will ever learn from the collaboration with us. It's not always about the same things, but the learning is very real. And so having the ability for them, for example, to contribute software in principle back into the open source community is important, because they would like to have some of the programs that they write nationalized, or what they call localized in the technology literature, to North Korea. They think that North Korea in some ways is different than, or North Korean is different in some ways than South Korean. And they want to be able to do that. And right now they have no vehicle for even talking about that with the various vendors, but they can through open source. Okay. Here are a couple pictures. This is the library facility when it was going up about 3 or 4 years ago. And this is a picture from the press of a tour of that they were giving to a visiting dignitary of the library as it existed about 9 months ago. Maybe a little more than 9 months ago. So the library went from an idea to space to a facility to an actually operating facility. And it is now, as best I can understand, at least working, at least in part, being administered by open source software using international standards for collecting the data. Okay. Here's a picture of the Kim Chek University of Technology Computer Lab. You actually can't see in this picture, but you could if you're closer to it, in a little higher resolution. They're running, in this case, Microsoft Windows. And this was a while ago. You see the pictures up on the top, making sure that they are getting proper advice and counsel if they have questions about what they need to do. But in fact, the computer scientists who are with us on the trip, on this particular trip, were quite impressed with what the Kim Chek University of Technology computer scientists were doing and accomplishing, and how they were trying to teach. We wanted to move, though, from the kind of bilateral to a multilateral program, which we call the Regional Scholars and Leaders Seminar Program. And this was important because we could then begin to bring technology universities in the region together, working with faculty from Kim Chek University, and begin to make kind of deliver on the notion that it might be, in principle at least, possible to share information using international standards. So we've got a university in China, we've got Kim Chek University, Pohang University of Science and Technology, which is one of the premier technology universities in the Republic of Korea, together with Syracuse University and the Korea Society. Initially, what we've been working on there is trying to emphasize what we call technical English or purposed English, getting them to the point that we can all participate in things like international conferences using a common language. And much of the English language training, which is excellent in many regards, that happens in North Korea, takes place in North Korea, really is not informed by the kind of needs that computer scientists in particular want to have. And so they've been voracious in trying to understand this. And at the same time, teaching of English is not neutral. We teach project management, we teach collaboration, we teach one thing anybody who's worked in the computer business, at least in the West, knows is it's a very non-hierarchical operation. Usually the person who knows the most is the one who's paid the least. And that's very different than what happens in a real hierarchical organization where the knowledge kind of flows up. And that's been a challenge in many countries that should become more open and decentralized, including the Republic of Korea, really, to get to the point that you could have team-based computer science research that was really innovative. And so it's not just the teaching of English, but it's trying to teach the way in which human organization can affect what's produced by groups and entities, and innovation in particular. But the goal, again, is to enable them ultimately to be able to participate in international meetings. Just to give you a sense of what can be accomplished through these rather simple, and I agree they are simple and not particularly sophisticated things, at one of the early RSLS meetings a couple years ago, this is a group of people who managed to come together at that meeting and to talk about the way in which the Regional Scholars and Leaders program would develop. And on the left is Chan Mo Park, who is now the retiring president of Pohang University of Science and Technology, but one of the very important scientists in South Korea. Next to him is Don Gregg, who was ambassador to South Korea and then chairman of the Korea Society. Next to him is Go Gun, who has been acting president of South Korea and was several times prime minister of South Korea and mayor of Seoul. A woman from the Beautiful Foundation, which was one of the groups that helped to fund this operation from South Korea. And then Shin Tae-sung, who is the professor and director of the computer laboratory at Kim Chek University of Technology. And it may not mean much to those of you that haven't dealt with North Korea, but to imagine these people coming together and having dinner and talking in a very friendly, open, free way and being willing to be photographed together is really pretty amazing. So that we consider to be a success. Let me give you some examples of the operation of RSLS here. And again, I apologize for the relative fuzziness of the picture, but if you could actually look at it more closely, you would see North Koreans, South Koreans, U.S. nationals, and Chinese nationals working together, trying to talk about information technology in English, all of them. The fellow on the left there, who has recently been posted now to the DPRK mission to the United Nations in New York City, Park Sang-il. And so these people have actually been moving forward as a result of their participation in our seminar. In the first RSLS seminar, one of the women who was there went back and became a director general in the Ministry of Education, and then worked with us to enable 3 undergraduate teams from North Korea to travel to China and train for the international intercollegiate computer programming contest. They successfully competed in that last January, February, as I recall, and they won a gold, silver, and bronze medal in that competition. So think of what that means again. The regime is permitting 3 teams from 3 different universities to travel to China, have unfettered access to the internet, and these are undergraduates now, and then participate in an international competition, in part using materials that were developed in the South and the United States. So again, the standards-based collaboration, building trust, enabling things to happen that might not otherwise have happened. Nearly finally, the DPRK Junior Faculty Leadership and Development Program, which I've already mentioned, but the idea is to bring these people for a longer stay in the United States, initially at Syracuse University, hopefully over the longer term to extend it to other universities. We had a conference here in Washington about a month ago that had, I think, 9 or 10 different universities who are interested in participating in this going forward if conditions permit. And the ultimate holy grail, from my standpoint, and I think Fred Carrier's standpoint, is that this could become a precursor to a Fulbright program that would enable North Korean scholars to come to the United States as Fulbrighters. And those of you who have worked with Iraq or the former Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries when they kind of fell apart know how expensive it is to do it after the damage is done. The time to begin to develop these things, in my view at least, is now, not after it becomes imperative that it be done. It's cheaper, and more importantly, it's a hell of a lot more effective. So this is an important part of the kind of program we're trying to do. Here's another picture of the Junior Faculty Junior Faculty Development Program and Regional Scholars and Leaders Seminar Program. Here's Chan-mo Park, again, the president of Postek University, lecturing to some North Koreans and Chinese about a particular area of computer science. And again, I emphasize we're very careful in what we're doing here to obey and be compliant with U.S. export control, including deemed export issues and the kind of information we're talking about. We have attorneys that review the curriculum every time. We limit ourselves to talking about things that are open source or openly available on the web. I'm happy to talk about that later, but we are very careful because one of the only ways this can continue to move forward is if both we and the North Koreans are operating within their own legal system. But I've been surprised by how much space there is once you grant that and begin to understand it to really do some non-trivial collaboration. Quickly, some lessons that we've learned. I don't know if they generalized anything else, but I want to just really rapidly go through these. Number one is the importance of institutional commitment. It's not just people to people, it's institution to institution. Syracuse University, Kim Chek University, and the Korea Society. Because in dealing with the North, or maybe from their perspective in dealing with the U.S., change happens. And when that change happens, it makes easy things hard sometimes and maybe hard things easy. So it's important that the institutions be committed, not just the individuals who happen to be there then. Second is to maintain focus. It's real easy to get seduced into wanting to do more things, and at least my experience has been that that's not helpful, especially given the way that North Korean bureaucracies work. It's important to build trust within particular so-called stovepipes in North Korea and be able to really leverage that. Consistency of participants. For us, this is not just an exchange, it's a collaboration. And for that to work, we can't start at ground zero every time. These are not study tours coming to the U.S. or study tours going to Pyongyang. It's the same people working together over an extended period and hopefully getting cumulative results and seeing the benefit of those results. Fourth one is get it in writing. I don't speak Korean, and in many ways that's an advantage in working with the North Koreans because it means that we have to really work hard to get agreements. Sometimes the easy agreements that are orally conveyed turn out not to be agreements at all and the source of real misunderstandings later on. So we've had some real cat and dog fights trying to get 1- and 2-page agreements written down, but in every instance, those 1- and 2-page agreements have paid back enormous dividends to us down the road because we both have something that we meant the same thing by. They're stable agreements. Do not overcommit, especially with the North Koreans, where it's hard for us, I think, in the U.S. to understand, but for many North Koreans to take a chance on these kinds of collaborations doesn't just put their professional career on hold a little bit. It can do a lot more than that. So if they go back saying that this is what's going to happen, it better happen, or there better be very easily understood reasons as to why it doesn't. So even after the missile test and nuclear test of last year, we were still able to continue these collaborations relatively unfettered. There were certainly slowdowns and speed-ups of them, but I think people understood that this was not all about high politics. And then I guess the last point, and probably the most important point in terms of the human relations and people side of this, is the informal communications are important to building trust. I'm a great believer in virtual reality. It's kind of what I do, or at least computer stuff is what I do most of the time. But no kind of virtual conference, teleconference, all this stuff is the same as sitting with them across the table, having meals, drinking soju, bringing them to German restaurants, and building the kind of rapport that allows you to work through the really difficult problems. They love the Kempinski Hotel in Beijing. It's one of their favorites for our welcoming dinner. And then the last one is have fun. Have fun with them. And this is an interesting picture because the guy on the right in the blue shirt is the former U.S. ambassador to El Salvador, and the guy on the left is the current DPRK ambassador to the United Nations. And they're in a little four-wheel drive vehicle wandering around the countryside of upstate New York. And they had a great time together. And they were able to talk to each other about things there that they could never have talked to each other about, even in a context of a room like this. And so it happened, I think, because they were enjoying each other's company, and they were able to do that because the context made that possible. So with that, let me stop and thank you again for your attention.